Okay, girls, the last chapter for this unit is going to be 10.6, which is experimenting with chance. So remember that in one of the previous videos I spoke about how probability can be experimental or theoretical, and all the probabilities that we've been working so far are theoretical. So it's with the example that, for example, that I used at the time was when you toss a coin. You say what is all the possible outcomes that I can get, and based on that we calculated the probabilities. I said that the other type of probability that you can calculate is experimental. So it's the one that you run an experiment and then you based and calculate your probabilities based on the result that you're getting from the experiment. Okay, so it's not theoretical, it's not taking into account all that can happen, is based on the experiment that you're running. So, and I spoke about something, and the term that I want you to use now is long-term trend. So what we expect in real life when we're doing an experiment is that the bigger the experiment, the more trials that you do on of that experiment, in the long term, the trend will be that it will become the theoretical probability. Theoretical probability. And this is used in real life a lot of the times because sometimes we don't know exactly what is the probability, so we have to do a lot of experiments, a lot of trials to find what is the probability of something. Let me give you an example. So like if I want to know if the American dollar, the US dollar, is going to be higher or lower tomorrow, like how can I know what is the probability of that happening? That's like, I have no idea. If I knew, I will be rich. Agree? But a lot of people, like what they do is that they do a lot of simulations. So they study the data of what have happened in the past, and they try to predict by doing simulations of what could be happening with experimental probabilities of what can happen tomorrow. And that's how banks run. That's how it works. They do this analysis, this numerical analysis, and they think, okay, the safest bet that we can do is invest in this portfolio because we think that in the market is going to raise value, or it's time to sell now because we think that tomorrow the price is going to drop. So this is done with simulations. So in this chapter, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be calculating experimental probabilities. So the only thing that you have to really to take into account is that in here your sample space is not what you in theory will happen. It's actually what happened when you run the experiment. Okay? And how you calculate the probability of any event that they give you? You're going to do the number of successful trials in an experiment. And what does successful mean? It depends. Let me just write this down. So it's the number of successful trials. The successful will be determined by the event. So, and you can do an experiment about anything. I remember that that day I was talking to you about the tossing a coin. So you can do that, and I want to buy the probability of getting heads. But if with the example that I gave, I think I told you that I had 2 heads and 1 tail. So if I'm finding what is the probability of getting a head, then I have to do number of successful trials in the experiment. So I got 2 successful ones over in total how many did I did, how many trials were done? 3. So that's what you have to take into account here. It's about the experiment. So over the total number of trials done. Okay? Do your exercises and let's talk about if you're confused about this. But this is more theoretical. It's more about theory, but it's about understanding what is the difference between theoretical probability and experimental probability. Okay, girls.